it is 4:30, and I'll call the meeting to order and acknowledge that the District of Tofino operates within the territory of the Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation, Tla-o-qui-aht. Notice to attendees that the meeting is being video recorded and will be published on the District of Tofino's YouTube channel. Notice to virtual attendees to sign up for public comment and question period using the Q&A function in Zoom. The registered participants are required to enter their full name, residential address, and the agenda item they wish to speak to. Through unanimous consent, if there are no objections, I move that pursuant to section 11(1) of the District of Tofino meeting procedure bylaws of 129/2016, the temporary facility provided for the public to watching here, the July 23rd, 2024 regular meeting is to be held in the multi-purpose room at the Tofino Community Hall located at 351 Arnett Road in Tofino, BC, and that the meeting is to be held electronically via Zoom and live broadcasted via the District of Tofino's YouTube channel. Seeing no objection, that motion is carried. And also through unanimous consent, if there are no objections, I move that the July 23rd, 2024 regular council agenda be adopted. Seeing no objection, that motion is carried. Consent agenda. Anybody wants anything removed? Any councillors want anything removed from the consent agenda? Now is the time. Seeing no requests, I'll again move through unanimous consent that items 4.1 to 4.4 of the consent agenda on the regular council meeting held July 23rd, 2024 be approved and received. Seeing no objection, that motion is carried. Adoption of the minutes, going right on to 6, public comment on agenda items. Ms. Peltra, do we have anybody signed up?
Thank you, Mayor Law. We do have one person signed up at the moment. Before I ask for this person to come up to the podium, I will now make a call to the public for comments. If there is anyone attending online via Zoom that would like to make a comment, you can do now. You can do so now using the Q&A function. You will need to state your name, your address, and the agenda item you're speaking to. I will now do a call calling once, calling twice, calling 3 times. No other person signed up. Mr. Bouquet, if you would like to come up to the podium, you have 2 minutes.
My name is Richard Bouquet. I live at 411 Cable Street. It's there since 1987, that property. I own the property also on 301 Main Street in Tofino. It is owned commercial, and I have tenants there since I bought a property about 23 years ago. Steady tenant, they've been there for some of them since the beginning. So they're really good tenants. For the last 2 years, there were a giant hole in the front of the city roadway at the center of my property. We have put up with noise, dust every day from trucks, excavating equipment, and blasting. There was not a lot of warning at the blasting, so my tenants were quite shocked to have their furniture move around. The tenant had limited to no access to the driveway. Once the tenant downstairs, provincial institution, which they need wheelchair access. There was no wheelchair access at all, and that I had to mention something to one of the workers to fill up the tank. That was about 8 inches high, so there's no wheelchair. It was difficult to get, even with a car, to get to the driveway. Now the project is almost finished. I can see a large permanent above ground structure in front of my property, blocking almost half of my frontage. The problem, as I can see, is now our loss of the view of the harbor, loss of opportunity to expand driveway access and parking to my commercial property, probability of noise, vibration, and odor when turned on and running. So, to fund this upgrade in our city infrastructure by 2023 tax.
Mr. Bouquet, sorry, it's a 2-minute limit, but just gonna make sure there's nobody else wishes to speak, because we do have a longer time limit for total comments.
I'm just about done with.
Sure, but this is just protocol. I have to do it for everybody, so nobody else is up.
Thank you, Mayor Law. No one else is signed up.
Okay, go ahead. You may finish.
Just about done. So my tax increased in 2023 by 9%. with the hole in front of the property. Now in 2024, I got an increase of 21%. So in the last 2 years, I got 30% increase with what I've got here. My property probably decreased by, I don't know how much, but a lot of money. For this increased tax, and I'm facing the very real possibility of devaluation of my property. At no time during the planning of construction phase of this project was I made aware by the city that my property was going to be affected in such a negative way. I would like to see the city engineering and consultant take a serious look at mediating my concern. If not all, can of the above ground structure be relocated 30 feet up the street in front of the municipal parking lot? Which it would make full sense. It would keep me lots of headaches free, which we all have issues these days, what's going on around everywhere. And I have that on top of it, which I didn't need it. Anyway, thank you very much for your time and understanding, and have a good day.
Thanks, Mr. Lee. Okay, nobody else signed up?
No, you're allowed, no one else is signed up for comments.
Okay, super, thanks very much. Well, on the mayor's reports, I have little to report except it's just wonderful to see the action in town and all the wonderful events, and the skate comp was so well attended, and so many great things going on. It just it feels like a very full town and a very exciting town, and I'm just happy to see so many people having such a great time. Mostly. Moving on, we have delegations. First up is 8.1, a delegation from the West Coast Multiplex Society regarding the concept and rationale for a high-performance surf center.
Wonderful. Hi, everyone. I'm Samantha Hackett. I'm the chair of the West Coast Multiplex Society, as I've spoken to many of you many times before. Some of you only maybe once or twice. But here on behalf of our volunteer board, our society that has been working on this project in its many iterations over many years. And is an exciting time to be sort of coming and speaking in front of you, because I think that the momentum and the conversations that have been happening over the last few months, I can honestly say I've heard more support and excitement around the project than I have in the whole 10 years that I've been a part of the project. Especially coming out of exciting weekend a couple weekends ago of the Saltwater Classic, where just the energy and the excitement around the collaboration of this project and all of the communities coming together. And I just want to take a moment to recognize, especially our First Nations communities that have supported the project: Tla-o-qui-aht, 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 and Tla-o-qui-aht, and then of course our communities like the District of Tofino, District of Q&amp, and Area C through the CRD. The dream and the support for health and wellness, recreation, education, and a space to bring our community together, it will never cease to exist, that need and that conversation. But we're really at a place with this project that it's not going to happen in the lifetime of those who formalized it almost 30 years ago. A project with this unique vision of this magnitude and collaboration takes years to form. And in its current form, we have a chance right now to really push it over the finish line. We can get it over that finish line if we come together now, and bringing a new perspective to the dream over many years is sort of where we're at and what we're coming with you to talk to you today. So we've explored many partnerships over the many years, and all of those we're very excited to be able to still have as part of the project. Things like the arts and culture, the emergency preparedness aspect of this facility, health and wellness, and talking with our health authorities. Also recent conversations with School District 70 of it being an education hub for the West Coast. And now elevating the surf aspect with a high performance surf center, which we're talking to you about today. In the words of our Team Canada coach, Shannon Brown, in Tahiti right now, he quoted, "We are in a hot spot. We have all the beaches. We have a huge talent pool of kids. We have coaches with the capacity and the credentials. And this is the place, and this is the time. The time is now." So with that, I'd like to introduce Kathy Fick, who has been a supporter of the project through many of her hats that she's worn over the years. and wanted to speak more specifically to the high performance surf center aspect that we're excited to bring to you today.
It's not fun. Yeah, it's nice to be on this side of the podium. So thank you for being here today, all of you. This is great. And I just want to say, I know you've got a loaded agenda and I know there's a lot to think about, but we are really the good news story for you today. So I hope you can just sit back and hear this and keep an open mind as to where we're going and why we're thinking about these things. So, but I do just want to take 1 minute off script to say kudos to all the staff for that pickleball and tennis development there. The change in what is going on there is unbelievable. There are hundreds of people. There was only a handful of us for so long. So I just want to say, that was a long struggle and I for one really appreciate it. And I'm so encouraged when I see the kids out there too. So thank you. Todd, I think he was really at the helm of that. But I just want to say good afternoon, council, and I'm here because I'm really excited to speak to you about the concept of this high performance surf center in conjunction with the multiplex. And this idea isn't a new one. In fact, it's been brewing in Tofino for probably 10 years. And it does exist in many high caliber surf locations, but it is new in Canada because there isn't one yet. So just a little bit of background to this idea, and some of you might remember the Tourism Tofino AGM in late March of this year, and we had 2 sitting ministers join us at that meeting. And the day after the meeting, they stayed for 3 days, Minister Popham and staff rode bikes down to Long Beach. And this was coordinated by Samantha, which she invited me to come to. So there, the minister and her entourage was met by Samantha, myself, Shannon Brown, Matea, and Caleb Temple. And the minister asked a lot of questions about the development of surfing in the area. And discussion ensued regarding a high performance surf center at Long Beach as a next step in surf development for high athletes or athletes in general. So this caught the attention of the minister, and following those discussions, I offered to write up the concept and rationale in a more formal way for the minister. And I was surprised that we actually got a response because, as you know, there's an election coming, and we're meeting with the minister on August the 19th, Minister Popham and Osborne, in regards to the brief which is attached in your agenda. And we were surprised at this because I was told by other people in government that, you won't hear anything till after the election. So I'm just saying, I was pleasantly surprised, and we wanted you to hear this because we don't want to go trotting off to the minister and not have you understand what we're speaking about. So what is it? So a high performance surf center, it can be found in Australia and Portugal and other places in the world, and they're proposed for many man-made surf wave centers. And there's right now, I think, 17 on the books to be developed in the world in 2024. Essentially, a high performance surf center is envisioned in the center with 3 to 4 rooms, 1 room for weight training, 1 room for learning tricks in air, such as a half pipe with full landing pits, and another for video review with an office. In total, it might be approximately 2,500 square feet. And an ideal location for the center would be adjacent to the proposed multiplex near Long Beach. So why the multiplex, you might ask? Well, in addition to being a logical spot next to a pool where kids are learning to swim so that they can surf, the airport location is in the geographical center of 11 surfable beaches on the West Coast. This provides almost equal access to all 8 communities, and the location is, as you know, just 10 minutes away from Long Beach, the best and most consistent and iconic surfing beach in Canada. So why now? Well, this week, as you all know, we celebrate Canada's first ever surfer to compete in the Olympics, Sanoa Olin, and who grew up in Tofino. And against all odds, she has earned the privilege of competing with 48 of the world's best surfers in Tahiti this week. That's why we wanted to come down. Yes, Sanoa is immensely talented and has been propelled by the competitive environment on the West Coast. She has had enormous opportunities growing up in Cox Bay and traveling to the best surf spots in the world and receiving the best coaching and training. And Sanoa, like many other talented surfers, have given Canada the distinction of now placing 9th in the world out of 50-something nations. I mean, this is amazing. And aside from our Olympic contenders, Sanoa, there's a huge talent pool of young kids on the West Coast who aspire to the same national and international competitions. And I don't know if many of you were at the Brew Weather Kids Classic, but in June, there was over 100 kids competing. And I remember about 10 years ago, when the kids were first competing, the parents were out in the water pushing the kids in the waves. And now they're doing airs and who knows what else I can't even describe. So we have and are continuing a healthy competitive environment. And in addition, there's a pressing and developing need, as you probably know, for surf guards on the West Coast to patrol the beaches. Long Beach and Cox Bay can easily have over 1,000 people a day on the beaches. And I had a conversation yesterday with our MP Gord Johns about this, and he said there's no other beach in Canada with that many people in and around the water where it is unguarded. So I said to him, well, that's great, we can develop a surf guard program, but how can a young adult or a kid become a surf guard if they don't know how to swim? And lastly, yeah, I guess I just wanted you to consider a couple of things in light of this conversation and this upcoming meeting in August with Ministers Popham and Osborne. And just something for you to consider. This is my leading thoughts for you is I would love for you to support the concept of a high performance surf center as part of the multiplex. And I would love, secondly, I would love for you to take a leadership role through this, perhaps, I'm thinking of the new recreation plan, which I've only just been made aware of, for the, just to nail down that idea of a collaborative recreation facility that may not be in the District of Tofino, but really helps all of our kids, all of our children and our grandchildren for the whole of the West Coast. So I think, in other words, we really need to rethink our regional approach to this recreation facility. And I think that this council is the one that needs to really take some leadership role on that. So I just would love to see that we move this dial on the multiplex forward, and the addition of a high performance surf center may be that thing that changes the maybe the turns the dial, but just, you know, I can see, if I was sitting, I'm not sure, Minister Bachman's desk, or maybe there's 20 communities that want something like this, but we have something that's very niche. So thank you. And on this auspicious week, it's been great to talk to you about this. So thanks.
I gotta say that. Good luck, Sonoma.
Good luck, Sonoma. We're all behind you.
Yeah.
Making this.
That's great, yeah, that's fantastic, thanks, thanks, you must stay up there, you have to open it up for council. Questions, comments from council? Yeah, absolutely.
I was wondering, like, after the skate contest, I was wondering if this skate ramp could be open and available for the skating community as well. And then also I was wondering if, will like the school maybe be invited to this, like to participate? Like, does it have to be the elite level or?
I think that's the interesting piece of when we're talking about a high performance surf center is that it's not just for high performance surfers. It's really being able to bring a national eye to what would be very much a community facility. All aspects of it would be accessible and usable from any age, you know, all the way up into adults, you know, even people past that elite level. That it's just about creating a hub for it all. So absolutely, it could be totally accessible. Something like an indoor half pipe, how important that would be to not just our surfing community, but all of our skateboarding community. You know, all of that indoor recreation aspect is really what the multiplex has always been about. It's about bringing something, you know, a hub indoors that can be accessible 365. And so absolutely would be a community facility. And I think the other thing that, you know, we've talked about many times over the years, especially with our municipal partners, has been the operating cost and how that is a huge burden for our communities. And so by bringing something that is such an international hub and sort of that international and national through Canada, level to something in Tofino, that's what brings also funders to fund operating. So that is a piece we've always looked at with our project, that we have private donors that are working with us on the capital, but a lot of them will be part of operating as well. And so by bringing something unique and something, you know, that really is more than just an arena and a pool, you know, make sure that then our funders are able to fund private throughout the operation of a facility like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate the delegation. We've been talking about this for a long time. And a quick question. You did, Kathy, speak towards rethinking a regional approach. And so I'm curious as to what you're thinking around that. And then specifically, are you going to take the show on the road to the other municipalities and to the ACRD, of course, where that facility service would be located? So I'm just curious of what you meant by rethink that regional approach, and if you are planning on going on the road.
You're first. Yeah. You know, I guess as we were all kind of a bit sidelined, I would say, from all the effort that, you know, when I was on council too, of the efforts that we put into the idea of the recreation complex being here in the District of Tofino. And having spoken and, you know, kind of walking down this road a little bit more, I'm hearing more and more from the minister, our MLA and our MP that, you know, if we don't think regionally, we will not be getting a recreation center. So that's why I'm saying, I think I'm just imploring you to, you know, kind of, you gotta switch hats, I'd say here. We gotta switch hats from thinking that this is the only place, this is the best place to do it, to we've got to do something regionally, or we're not going to get the funding that we need. And you know, I just think there's huge benefit in the whole West Coast collaborating together. So, and I think that this is just one piece of the puzzle that could help to change this from just a pool and an arena. I don't want to say that in a glib way, but you know, to making something really unique that only the West Coast of Canada can offer, and that will make us stand out. And we need that fighting chance, I think.
And quickly, just we are our delegation to District of Q&amp is next Tuesday. So we do have both municipalities, and then we had a delegation to Tla-o-qui-aht beginning of June. Beginning of June was the first week of June. And then we'll be talking with them again shortly. And so West Coast Committee, hopefully beginning of September. Be here.
See you there.
Yeah.
I guess back to operating costs, because there's been talks of the District of Tofino being in support of this and other districts as well. But the project's transformed quite a bit since that time. When would we be able to expect a realistic number for operating costs of what our share would be? Because I have a really hard time putting my support behind something where we don't have any idea what the financial impact is.
Of course, yeah. So our the current referendum with the ACRD, and this was as of 2023, so I don't know what the current number would be. So it would have actually been from 2022, was that we were close to about $1 million in the operating deficit that could be taxed. Now that's throughout the whole regional district, so I don't know what the District of Tofino portion is. But I could definitely get that number. What we're working right now at the same time, so we are looking to apply to the Infrastructure Canada fund that will open up in September. Which will be coming again through all the communities to have a formal ask for that once we have the details, a formal letter of support, and that will have the business plan and the actual operating costs and numbers by then. But we are looking at about $1 million or just over for the actual operating of the facility of an arena and a pool. That's in its full iteration. Even though things have changed as far as operating in an arena and a pool, you know, as things have changed, it's still the cost is similar to what we've always looked at as far as of how that's going to break down. So we are not anticipating the high performance surf aspect is actually a very small component. You know, like as you mentioned, it's kind of rooms. There's not staffing component to it. You know, when it's being used, it would actually create revenue. So that's another piece in our business plan. Has always been a conservative business plan. It doesn't include the amount of revenue that can be generated through different events and things happening at the facility. So there's actually a lot of opportunities with grants, private funders and event type revenue to actually keep that operating cost even lower.
Yeah, I like the idea of the search center. Gives it more dynamic. My question is sort of what we have this sort of conceptual design. How far has the design been developed?
The what I had handed out at the beginning there is what's on our website, and it's a full design costing report. It's a Class D right now. They're currently, the designers are working on the Class C for the actual application, but what you see for the renderings is the arena and pool. All the other aspects that we talked about, so you can kind of see in the design, there is space to be adding on, whether it is couple rooms, a half pipe, you know, those sort of things are, like Kathy said, at 2,500 square feet. Other, you know, an education room for School District 70, and whatever else there might be, would all be easily added onto that. And so that way you have the renderings are the final what we're working on for a Class C estimate.
Great.
Yes.
I have one more question. It's a bit of a stupid one. And I understand that the water is not coming from Tofino, but I am curious whose water system this is drawing on, as it's something that's being more of a concern for all of our communities.
Yes, regional district, sewer and water. Yeah, so airport, all the facility buildings. And to that note, the regional district has had multiplex included in all of their number forecasting. So the pool and arena, so the draw on obviously a pool to water infrastructure, all that sort of thing has been built out over the many years in their ability. That's, I think, one of the reasons they've been able to access grants for sewer and water is because this is part of that future plan.
Great.
I just have one question about the timeline. I know historically the multiplex started as arena first, pool second, and then it became both at the same time, which drew a lot more support from the community who obviously does value swimming lessons. Where does the surf center fall in the construction timeline?
If it was part of the facility, it would be all together. One of the main reasons that we went away from the phased was because of the cost to build. It didn't make sense to do that twice, to bring all of the contractors, to bring everybody together. You're actually saving money by doing it at the same time, which hadn't been looked at from the building perspective. It had been more looked at from the initial capital costs. And so this would be something that we'd want to be part of the initial build, to be part of the facility right from the get-go.
Sure.
Is there any concern that by adding further building cost, it could be delaying the project even further? Or is it still so far away that it's pretty manageable?
Because we have built in those sort of additions right from the get-go with our designers, it wouldn't delay anything. What we're sort of looking at is if this is an interest and if this is something that makes sense both for funders, for the government, for our local partners, that it would be built right from right away, that it wouldn't be something that's added on later or thought of after. We want to sort of gauge the interest. Is it something we should be putting in the plan right away? And making it the main driver for this facility to get funders and to raise, it's $50 million that we're looking at for this facility, to raise that amount through, it's not just going to be federal and provincial, it's going to be a lot of private funders. Something like this will bring more private interest to the table from the get-go, and so to have it as part of it right from day one helps.
Thank you.
I just have a couple questions. Has there ever been any thought to like having a basketball court at some date in the future?
It had been in our plans over the years, off and on. has been in there, it's been not in there. Working with Tla-o-qui-aht, that's been something that we've been trying to figure out if that makes sense, because there has been a plan for that similar facility in Tla-o-qui-aht area. And so not wanting to compete with that, the ability in an arena to use it as a basketball court or multiple basketball courts when the ice is not there, or to bring a removable floor is has not necessarily given us the need to add a separate court, because we're able to use the facility for that. But it's something that we absolutely have always known that it could be a part of the facility if it was deemed a priority.
And then one more.
Sure.
So I believe I saw like a workout area in here. I was wondering if that could be accessible at all to parents, if like there's a skating thing going on, if they could go work out in there, or.
That's one of the key things with having multiple things, is that you can be doing different things. Yeah, that there's each age group, you know, each child could be doing a different activity, each family member could be doing a different activity. So yeah, fitness center, even the physio aspect, that there could be that health and wellness component while someone's skating or swimming, or so it's all part of that.
Great, thanks. Oh, there we go.
Saving the best for last. In the past, it was always build the rink first and then the pool. Second or last, whichever way you want to put it. Now, in the ideal world, you're saying we're going to get this funding and we're going to do everything all at once. So let's take the non-ideal world and say there's all this momentum to build a surf centre and pool. Would there be any momentum to do the pool and the surf centre first before you did the rink?
It would be something that would.
Because we know the community always wants a pool.
I think the biggest thing for us is that because we're working with 8 communities and because we're working with so many aspects, so you know, it takes away a lot of the emergency preparedness aspects of it. The arts, culture, heritage, some of the events, and so we haven't ever looked at it being phased that way. But it's not to say that, I mean, we're of course open to any conversation. It's up to the 8 communities how you direct and drive the society forward. So that's where this has always come from. All the decisions have been, the phased approach was only because of funds, as you know, and then as we started to talk to our private fundraising experts over the years, they've sort of said it doesn't make sense to phase if you're going to do a project of this magnitude in a community as unique as we all are as 8 communities. Then you have to bring it together and really make the project stand out from every other project that's asking for funding.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Only, I mean, I'm not in love with the hockey rink anyway, but I am just curious because it doesn't seem to be much of a viewing area in this rendering. There seems to be people benches, and I'm thinking if we have a hockey rink and they want to host tournaments, or they want to turn it into a basketball court and host some of the basketball tournaments that have happened, how is this going to generate funds as an event space if there's not much for bleachers or viewing or concessions?
There is about 100 people viewing. You can't tell there, but on the one side, that is quite a significant bleacher area. So that's with the arena in. It actually has about 100 people, and then when you have, say, an event in the middle, it would be about 300 people. So like if you had a gymnastics event, wrestling event, basketball, something right in the middle, it's about 300. And then if you have the full space, like as a convention center type thing, and then it goes up from there. So it has been something that we've made sure is something doable, but also that it can expand if we need a portion. The glass as well, that sort of indoor viewing area, as well as a piece of that.
Great. Well, I'll just close off and say I like the idea. I think it's timely. I think it makes the whole project more appealing, more of a national draw as opposed to a regional rec center, which is what it's always been sort of envisioned at. So I really like it. It was a bit timely. Just I did want to say I did talk to our MP, Gord Johns, and there is significant, more than just significant discussion at the federal level on a regional surf guard program. So I think it's good timing, and Thank you very much for your presentation.
So can we say to the minister that we have some support from you, or how, or we leave it as open?
We'll come back in August, next August meeting.
I'll let you know how it goes, but we're gonna just leave it open at the moment, yeah?
Open as
Well,
in,
I had said at the beginning, you know, would you be able to support this notionally? I'm just saying notionally, would you? I feel like we would be going with a bit of a blank slate from Tofino. I have no kind of feeling of what you would. I mean, we're not asking for money or anything like that. We're just saying, do you notionally agree with the concept or?
yeah, I mean, I think, I think council's pretty, amenable to the idea of the surf training center as being part of this, and I think that's what you're asking. And then the regional 8 community discussion has to happen at a political level, and I do hope that happens very soon. Would be ideal if at least the communities can get together and start to discuss at a political level what, you know, what's gonna happen. So, yeah, and encouraging.
Yeah,
you
thanks a lot.
both. Thank you. Okay. We have, moving on to item 9, correspondence. Richard Beaupier, of course, spoke, no, Main Street construction. There are some comments, I think, certainly from staff and perhaps from council on this. Go ahead, Councillor Steer.
Yeah, I was gonna look to, staff. I mean, Mr. Beaupier brings up some legitimate concerns and, you know, I think there's no question we can sense the frustration in Richard's conversation with us. I'm just wondering, and I think staff has addressed the letter and some of the particulars that were articulated in there, and I'm wondering if staff might be able to give us an update and as to the conversations with Richard at this point.
Yeah, I don't think there has been a staff discussion with Mr. Beaupier at this point.
There was no,
but there was significant staff time put into looking at the background and some of the timelines of what happened. My understanding that you know, I can speak to it or staff can speak briefly to that for council's benefit. You want me to go ahead? Sure, and you know, just this has been prepared by staff. Staff did look at this. So the design location was finalized a couple of years ago, 2022, during the conveyance process, design process. The location did change slightly. And I think there was a significant changeover in staff as well. And so I think there might have been a bit of a communication gap. What else can I say about this? I think, you know, I think we all can recognize that there was certainly a communication gap, but obviously the request to move the infrastructure it can't happen for multiple reasons. So the infrastructure will stay there. You know, I do understand that the office will be wrapped, so they will look a lot less industrial. Certainly there has been issues with odor in the past from the very closely located previous pump station, and that will be mitigated as well. So there won't be that issue. So that's I don't. Councillor Steer?
Yeah.
And I actually have,
Oh, sorry.
Councillor Story as well. Councillor Story, go ahead.
I may be misremembering a comment made in the conversation, but was part of the reason that the station couldn't be located further in front of the district property because it would impact line of sight in the intersection? Is that
That's a good question. I am not sure about that. Maybe staff can answer that.
Sure. Yeah, through the chair, I don't have information on that. I'm not aware of that being an issue. So the original infrastructure was intended to go on our parking lots, which we wanted to preserve for future building opportunities. And so we relocated it at the time to the roadway. and the infrastructure in there. We didn't do any engagement with the community, as we didn't do much engagement with the community for this project, due to the nature of it. We're putting pretty, generational infrastructure into the ground. I think we could have undertaken a process a little bit differently in retrospect, but unfortunately, the infrastructure we have now there is in place, and it would be, if it's not impossible, it'd be extremely costly to move it. What we're going to try to do is work with community services to try to make it less intrusive. The new infrastructure, we're hoping, and is designed to be significantly less, a significantly less source of an odor. We can never promise with that type of thing that we can be less, but we're not going to be dealing with wastewater that's been in the pipe for a week to 10 days. We're going to be dealing with stuff that's moving a fair amount quicker. We have better odor control in place. In terms of noise, it'll be just sort of general pump noise here and there, unless we have a power outage, and then we have those new generators to run those systems. So I appreciate where Mr. Ecstatic is coming from, and I don't really have any other information to add other than that.
Councillor Steer.
Was through the chair, was this communicated with Mr. Beaupier, the information that we're having here, in essence, a response to the letter that he wrote?
Yeah, I can speak to that. We were waiting for council to receive correspondence and have a discussion today, and staff will respond after today's meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, it's obviously not ideal for Mr. Beaupier, and we all definitely understand that. Any further comments from council? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. We have the Vancouver Humane Society regarding UBC and bear protection motion. Now, as we get closer to UBCM, we do receive these requests often, and our end as a council to support them. Normally, it's been certainly in the past 4 years or so practice of this previous council and this council to simply allow councillors to go to UBCM and vote as they deem best. But any comments from council on this correspondence? I see none, so I think we'll stick with that and encourage council to individually as how they see best. Moving on to presentation of reports, 10.1, Minister Public Policy, water allocation priorities. Mr. Thick.
Bit of a joint presentation between myself and Mr. Rogers, so I'm going to be passing over him. So, as the title on the wall there now says, it's the kind of a discussion about our ministerial policy, or I would say kind of a portion of our ministerial policy, where we're starting to try to wrap our heads around the idea of water allocation or potential water allocation, depending on how this all shakes out. So just a brief little bit of background here. I know council is quite well aware of what's going on, but it's sometimes worth reiterating a few things. Really, this ministerial policy is being developed in response to the water master plan. Obviously, we have two ways that have been, two basic ways that have been presented through the water master plan to kind of understand our water. We have our maximum daily demand and our average daily demand. Based on our maximum daily demand, we're currently in a deficit of raw water. Our raw water supply is not sufficient to keep up with the maximum daily demand. However, based on average daily demand, we're not deficient currently, but we may be in the future should we follow the growth projections that are baked into the water master plan. So overall, our limits growth policy is essentially looking to answer the following three questions, and maybe some others that kind of come up as well as we work through this. But right now, what we're kind of thinking about is how many more new water connections will we allow, given our current understanding of our water infrastructure, in particular raw water supply. How do we prioritize those new connections? And finally, how do we allocate and track those new connections? So we need to have a bit of a system for understanding what qualifies for new connection, how we understand how much water that new connection will potentially take, and then how we essentially count that as used water in this policy within our overall acceptable tolerance limit for new connections and risk. So today's purpose, the purpose of our kind of little presentation today is really to outline some priorities and guiding documents. This is something that we do with a lot of planning applications, but it's something that's we're visiting all the time. Briefly discuss the water master plan models and assumptions, and Mr. Rogers will be mostly talking about that. We're going to take a look at some water usage from different development technologies based exclusively on district records. We're also going to examine some of the current development proposals that are under consideration. We'll have a little conversation about how we might consider tracking water usage, and also how we might consider application methodology. I just want to kind of note at this point in time, sort of this overall idea of future water allowance, risk tolerance, all that kind of stuff will be discussed in a subsequent meeting. Today, a lot of the numbers and the engineering stuff that we're presenting are more just for illustration purposes, only and to kind of round out the discussion. We're not looking at council to make any specific decision about how much more raw water or how many more new connections we might consider at this point in time. Mr. Rogers is currently working on how to manage or how to relate that to risk and the various scenarios that we might be encountering. So that would be a conversation for next time that we're council talking about relates to a policy likely in a couple weeks. Taking a quick look at our guiding policy, you might recognize this slide from the numerous rezoning applications we look at, but it's also really helpful for us to consider in this situation as well. A lot of our guiding plans and policies really are just that, for almost anything that we do, they do have a bit of a bearing on how we think about them. So that's why I spent some time outlining the report that was part of council's agenda. We have this slide up today. So just briefly, the vision to action, again, such a high level plan, it doesn't really have a lot of specific recommendations, but it does outline a kind of a desire for really quality and diverse housing typologies within the community. It talks a lot about water conservation and does also look for us to acknowledge ecological limits growth as well as social and fiscal limits to growth. So there's some kind of high level language there that we would like to be kind of pulling out and using to guide us, at least at a high level, as we're starting to work through this industry growth policy in a little bit more detail. The official community plan really does focus land development for the next few years on affordable and some market housing north of industrial way, so kind of in the downtown core part of Tofino. It does also make mention of limiting intensive water uses, particularly commercial and industrial water uses, and has a few policies there where we support rainwater harvesting and alternative methods for servicing. And then the housing needs assessment is kind of the other key document that I spent a bit of time talking about in the report there. Really, it screws down a little bit even further than the OCP and it kind of talks a little bit more about typology. So really looks to be supportive of dense market, non-market housing aligned with transport infrastructure. So again, we want stuff kind of in the downtown core, more walkable, coupled with environmental protection. So none of these things are new to council, but it is worth just kind of reiterating them and acknowledging that this is sort of the starting point for us when we're considering this limits to growth policy and what it is that we've said we do as a community and how we might incorporate these priorities given potentially limited raw water supply or potentially currently limited raw water supply. I think at this point, maybe I'll just pass it over to Mr. Rogers because he's got these slides that here. He's going to talk through some numbers in a bit more detail about the water master plan.
The next 4 to 5 slides, it's an attempt for me to help explain a section of the report about the water master plan. And I just wanted to make sure that we're all on the same page when it comes to some definitions. And I worked with our engineers over the last week. Generally, for if you were to develop a new system, you would use maximum data demand and we would flow through systems and you design a system based on maximum data demand, and that would be design guideline based. So that would be a standard somewhere. In our case, it would be in the I think MMCD documents. It says you should design a standard to 1.6 or 1.5. You're something. That would be how you would design it if you start from scratch. We already have a system. And so and that would tell you about hydraulic capacity. So hydraulic capacity is the pressures that actually go through our pipes. So do we have enough pressure for fire flow? Do we have enough pressure for domestic needs? Do we have enough pressure for fire? The other side of the system is the capacity side of the system. And in designing a system, because we have data, we would actually use MDD meter data, which we have. We know what our maximum data demand is every single year. And so in terms of capacity, and if we were designing a new system, we could use that. We also have average day demand, which is actually what we use, not what we're using if we are designing a new system. And so if we're going to have a conversation about moving forward, it's going to be in that conversation between the maximum day demand, the meter-based data that we have, the water plan, and the average day demand, if we know what we're using, and we have reliable records over the last 12 years to help us be really comfortable with what how we do or what partner do. And I just want to say after the bat that it's obviously we know this, but the water treatment, the water master plan, that's my problem there. The water master plan actually assumes a fair amount of growth. So if you look through the system, we'll skip that table, you'll see in 2033, there's more demand than there is in 2043. And I'll get to that in a little bit, but I just want to make sure that everybody understands currently the water master plan assumes a level of growth. Again, capacity, that's our raw water volume. Hydraulic pressures is our domestic and powerful pressures. Those are two different things. The limits to growth policy is focused on the capacity side of this equation. Our hydraulic pressure is separate, and our system is in really good shape for hydraulic pressures for 20 years at least, especially if we reduce growth and especially if we build downtown. And not only that, our development cost charge program and our capital infrastructure program will continue to improve that section, but there's very little to improve at this point on the hydraulic side of this equation. What we're concerned about and what limited growth is specifically concerned about is capacity. How much water we have in the streams at any time. Again, just a little bit more definitions. Maximum day demand, again, is the highest day of demand. And what we're talking about is quarter three. It's not an average, it's the highest average. It's the highest average is the 12 years we're looking at, but it's the highest average day, not what we use on a daily basis. If you were to use MDD, the current MDD, and we've seen this, as the reason we've said no to a fair amount of, or to a couple of developments, is that we're in deficit if we used MDD as a number. And at that point, we could safely say that we don't want to see any growth, which is why we're going this one simple policy. Do we want to assume any more risk or not? Average day demand is measured at the meter. It's based on historical demand. Currently, we on average in quarter three use about 1,827 meters cubed. Our current raw water capacity is 2160, which gives us a surplus of 330 meters cubed in the year 2024. The current raw water capacity is based on the low flow from 2023. So that's a low flow number in 2023. In 2033, we're projecting that our needs will be at an average daily will be 2,129 meters cubed. But that again assumes growth. So if we put a cap on growth now, we may not hit 2129. We'll do whatever we can. So for example, we were to add 100 cubic meters, we'd be adding 100 cubic meters to the 1827, not using the 2129. 2129 assumes growth. One of our issues is that the raw water capacity in 2033 is 1874. So our model showed a decrease in raw water capacity as time goes on due to the effects of climate change. Obviously, we don't know if it happens all at once, when it happens, but that's what we're projecting. That's what the water master plan projects. So the difference between those two in 2033 currently in the plan show a deficit of 255 meters cubed. We believe there is some level of growth that may be possible if you use average day demand as you determined. I think there is growth there, and I'll explain it in this next slide. So currently, we're using average 1,827 cubic meters of water in an average day in Q3. In 2033, our raw water capacity is going to be 1874, again, based on our projections, leaving us a surplus between those two numbers of about 57 meters cubed. So I think you could safely say if you capped development as it is now, and you look to how much water we would have on a low flow day in 2033, you probably have some room for growth. The question is, and that's probably, I mean, is likely the lowest risk option that we have. And so when we go to risk next meeting, we're gonna talk about what does 0 meters cubed look like? What does 50 meters cubed look like? What does 100 meters cubed look like? What does 200 meters cubed look like? And then have a conversation and make a decision about whether we're willing to accept any further level of risk based on these numbers. The last thing I'll say, and this is the funny thing with this, and I think we're all aware of it, is last year we were in a situation where we were probably, you know, in that raw water, we were in that raw water capacity maximum, like the minimum, that 2160. This year, currently today, we haven't had more than, I think, less than 2 mils of rain in July, and we're still at about 4,000 cubic meters coming off the mountain every day. So the fog helps, the cool weather helps. Our demand is up a little bit this year, but we're also not into phase 2, so we haven't asked anybody to conserve. So when we speak about this, we're making our best guesses. Each year is going to be different, and it's about how we manage that. I'm confident that we've gotten very good at managing our system. I'm confident that if we have to drive down consumption through our rates, through our water conservation plan and our stages, that we can do so, but we can't control the weather. I'm gonna leave that. Unless there's any questions for my section, yes.
I do have a question, actually, just a question for clarity on ADD.
Yeah.
And I know that just because 1827 is like, it's fairly low, a low number. When we look back at last year, where we were able to, the community was able to rally and bring the average daily demand down to about 1800 with significant restrictions. You know, and that still put us, I mean, that was a very dry year, but it still put us in a pretty, you know, tight spot. And I know this year, our average daily demand, at least for the past, you know, weeks, has been 2300, about that. So that's not 1800. So if you could just clarify how that ADD reflects against, you know, the experience last year with our actual usage and this year with their actual usage, and then, you know, that would help.
Yeah, it's a good question. So that number, the 1827, is based on 12 years of data for Q3 for water use. So that's 12 years of data aggregated into an average for that time. So we're trying to use the best data we have going back as far as we have good data to come up with that number. Each year is going to be different. In the years past, we've declared stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 often. Like, it's not that it hasn't happened. It's not that last was the only year that we declared stage 2 or stage 3. In the summertime in Tofino, we're generally conserving anyways, and have been for years. This year is different. This year, our demand is high because we have not sounded the alarms, because we made a decision as a community to run as hard as we could with as much water as possible, because we have it. If we don't use it, it's just spilling over there. So I'm not suggesting that I know for sure that's the case. I could suggest that from what I understand, occupancy is down in Tofino across the board. And so my guess is this is more related to the fact that we haven't asked anybody to conserve. And normally for the last 8 years we have. Like, we're well into July, we're about to go into August, and we haven't said anything other than, hey, we're, you know, phase 1, but we haven't asked anybody to do that. So I think that's the best way I can answer it, is that that's the 12-year average. This year is different. Last year was different. The further we go, the more information we'll have. But again, we're all in the realm of, you know,
Yeah.
it's a tough thing to forecast.
If just kind of just one more question there is the last 12 years, that's ADD based on the last 12 years, is that adjusted for growth?
No, that's the average data demand for the last 12 years.
Okay.
So the 2033 number is adjusted for growth. So the 2023 number and the 2024 number, you can see our average data demand increases because the plan assumes growth. But we have now this opportunity to limit the growth. We're going to limit growth and make a different decision. It doesn't change the fact that our raw water capacity will probably be there, maybe it'll be higher, who knows, or our treatment capacity subject to us doing any improvements. And so that's where I tried to get with this. I'm like, we can't make this a decision based on what our 2023 or 2024 numbers, because we're not gonna be there in 10 years. And when we talk about limited growth, we're talking about how much water for what uses for how long. And so pick this information is here and pick that 10-year time frame to come up with that calculation. There's no magic to it. But I just wanted to.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for that. Sure, Councillor.
How does the pandemic, when we were closed, figure into that ADD? Is that taken out or?
No, they would be there as well. We were very busy in the pandemic.
Very busy. Okay, any other questions? Go ahead. Sure.
So that's our projected growth numbers, and we're talking about what it would look like if we were to freeze growth. However, we do, potentially have larger infrastructure projects coming online, daycares, maybe hospital improvements, maybe all sorts of existing structures growing or putting in new things that may use water. Is that part of what we would see if we froze new development? Like, is that sort of thought about?
Of course, yeah, it's a great question. So right now what we're presenting is, here's what we have. And Peter's gonna go on and present what the typologies, how much each typology uses for water. I think we stick mostly residential in his proposal. But attached to your report is a draft, is an example of what another community did. It's a pretty good example. And what you do in these policies, so this meeting, there's a risk meeting next month, and then we're gonna have probably the final meeting in September where we present a policy based on the information we hear from council, grow, not grow. Something that's probably in a similar format to what you've seen in your package today. And it should, if it works, encompass everything. So it can't just be, you have to have an answer for every single person who comes in the door and says, I want to build a new hospital, and you want to have a policy that says, sure, you can build a new hospital because everybody needs a hospital, or sure, you can build a hospital if you don't use any more water, or so on and so forth. There's a lot of water uses like daycares, it doesn't use that much water. But if we are limiting growth, we need to talk about that. And we have to understand whether we're gonna ignore those, like all daycares are good just because of what they are, or daycare is good if X amount of water. So in the end, the policy should address everything. No policy is perfect, but we'll do our best to try to look for any eventualities.
Thank you.
Right, carry on, thanks.
Class. So I'll carry on, talk a little bit here about a few other things that are, again, not anything that we're expecting council to make a decision on, but just some kind of surrounding knowledge that is staff account that might be interesting for us to know, potentially comment on. So this is water usage by typology, and so what's happening here when we get these numbers from the average water meter usage was we basically took the numbers from Q3 in 2023, that was last summer. So acknowledging also that we did have some fairly significant restrictions in place, but that was still sort of our highest water usage through that time of year. And we took a certain amount of single family dwellings, certain amount of duplexes, fourplexes, townhouses, apartments, staff campgrounds, because they do tend to come up. And we averaged out their usage based on the water meter readings. And we came up with these numbers. So basically, for a single family dwelling, we have about half the peak meter per day unit. That's on average. And so some are a little bit less than that, some are significantly more than that. Again, it's here. Duplex, fourplex, townhouse. The point that we're kind of trying to make in this chart is that the type of housing that we say we want actually uses less water. So we kind of get a little bit more bang for our buck if, as a community, we've decided that we want to create as much housing as possible. We've decided that that's the priority. So there's kind of development potential based on water capacity, risk tolerance. I'll just acknowledge up front that this was myself and our senior planner, Mr. Alex Later, doing these calculations. Neither of us are engineers, so they should be kind of, these numbers should be for more illustrative purposes as opposed to development of that. But again, it kind of reiterates that a lot of the stuff that we're already trying to do kind of lends itself to this limits rule policy and is generally supported by what we've seen in terms of our water usage. And again, if as a community, as a council, as staff, we're looking to prioritize housing development to house as many people as efficiently as possible, given our constraints with infrastructure, our OCD, our HNA, where we're kind of moving in the right direction already with those documents. I also wanted to touch on these are sort of the more significant development proposals that are currently in our queue and have I would say staff, based on the amount of work staff have done on them, based on our conversations with the applicant, have a fairly reasonably high chance of making it through rezoning and potentially going through the full building process. The closed caption is kind of covering the one total at the bottom there, but oh, thanks. Listen, no big deal. I can kind of talk around it, I'm sure. Oh, there actually isn't anything there. But the point being, again, on the far right, the bottom column there shows that we, based on usage. So again, this is not kind of based on as Mr. Rogers was talking about earlier, sort of our hydraulic capacity, those kinds of things. Based on usage, we're already looking at about 62 cubic meters of water per day added to our current use, based on a fairly conservative, but definitely certainly an average estimate of what these various developments may use. And most of these are still in the rezoning phase, or just kind of entering into the development permit phase, or starting to get the building permit phase. So not all of these will be built, but there's a good chance that a good portion of these may end up making through rezoning, potentially going through to the building stage as well. So I want to talk briefly about the idea of tracking water usage, interesting aspect of the policy. How do we say we, for example, decide that we want to grant 15 cubic meters per day of water usage? How do we track that as coming in the queue? How do we say that this person has that water allocated already? Does it just become a race to who can build fastest? That doesn't necessarily seem to be a wisest approach. So taking a look at various similar policies that we find related to what we're trying to do here. A lot of the way that water usage and allocation is tracked is actually right at the beginning of an application. So whether that's at the start of a rezoning application, the start of a building permit, start of a development permit, that water allocation is then given to that particular application. Should the application not be successful, then the water allocation goes back into the main pool and is available to a new applicant. But that seems to be the most reasonable, fair, and conservative as well way to consider water allocation. So this section of policy, kind of what we're looking at would be, establishing some sort of authority. Who is the authority for granting these water allocations? Is it council? Is it staff? Those would be kind of probably the two ways that this one can go. What's the overall mechanism for granting and tracking allocation? How do we evaluate various applications? When is it that we actually say, okay, is it after permission received, the application, or is it right when we receive a building permit application? We say, okay, this particular development now has this water allocated to it. Some of the other policies that we looked at even have things that kind of like certificate of water allocations, and they're good for say 3 years depending on the application. And so you have essentially it's a rebuilding that we say you like. So yeah, you can use this water, and you have 3 years to kind of get through the rezoning and the construction phase and actually use that. And if you're not able to successfully complete that particular time period, maybe you can access that water allocation. So and then yeah, of course we'll have some assessment criteria for evaluating proposals, and then exemption criteria. So as Mr. Rogers was alluding to kind of towards the end of his presentation there, we do need to have this proposal kind of not only consider our risk, but also kind of consider how we will be taking on that risk, and consider the various situations, development situations that might come at us as we discuss. So I think that actually brings us to the end of everything. There may be some additional questions between myself and Mr. Rogers. We'll be happy to do our best to answer them. So any questions for you?
Super, thank you. Questions? Councilor Anderson.
A couple things come to mind on the typologies. I'm wondering if the single family dwelling, because our bylaw allows for over 5 or suite. So is this single family dwelling sort of a bit like a duplex in that typology, or is there's? That was one question I have.
Yeah, so thanks for your question. We broke things out based on within our kind of our GIS and then within our billing software, we have codes for the various uses on property. So single family dwellings, duplexes, those kinds of things. We based a lot of our numbers off of those codes that are within our GIS software primarily. That being said, it was largely an average of single family homes. So some single family homes quite large, maybe have an accessory dwelling unit. Lots of single family homes I would say in Tofino probably have a secondary suite. Some are used for vacation rentals, some are not used for vacation rentals. So again, we were trying to avoid getting too deep in the weeds of saying, well, this one has a suite, this one doesn't have a suite, this one has an ADU, this one is vacation rental for X number of days a year, this one is not vacation rental. Instead, we just said, across the board, these are single family zone lots, and so this is how much usage that we see in them. But of course, there's certainly simplification in that technology.
The other thoughts I have are more comments than questions.
Well, let's go to the master.
I just want to get something straight with more on timeframes with proposing a policy which is going to be incorporated into the zoning rewrite sometime down the road. So when does the approved allocation, when does it take effect, when we approve the policy or when the zoning rewrite bylaw comes into effect?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Councilman Master. The intent at this point, and you'll see this in our zoning, the next slide that I present, is that we have to get the growth sorted before we get too far down zoning, because it's going to impact everything. Every decision we make in zoning is going to be based on limits to growth. And so it's our intent to have a policy for our council by early September for you to make a decision on. So that would include whether we're willing to grow anymore and how much and in under what what considerations. And so it's my hope that in early September, we have to do a meeting or two, that's wrapped up before I get you the next zoning report.
So if we adopt it, it takes effect in September and we say these are the.
Yeah.
Because my point is you've got Collingwood, you've got Okotoks, and I can put Dover in there. Every one of them imposed a moratorium on development while they were sorting out their allocation of water, ranging from 2 years to 17 years. And yet we seem to be bumbling along, carrying on doing development while we're waiting to agree on this policy.
I think I understand.
Are they smarter than us or are we smarter than them?
Well, I don't know that what you're saying is completely accurate. So right now what's happening is I'm denying building permits based on MDD and what the water master plan says for larger developments that will seriously impact our system. So that moratorium that we don't use the word moratorium, but in essence, that's happening at the staff level. That's a very uncomfortable place for a staff member to be making a decision on a community-based thing without a council providing direction or policy. So it's always been our intent to get to council a policy that you will have approved that says, in this instance, single family house or a resort or a hospital, the District of Tofino will do this. But once it's in place, it's in place. What's going to be one of the complicating factors of that policy is what we do in stream applications. And so that will be part of the policy. So the list that Peter provided, if those proposals in that list meet the criteria in our policy, then they may continue on, but they're going to be, if we go that way, they'll be allocated a certain amount of water if we decide to do so. If council decides that it doesn't want to develop anymore, they want to go to MDD, then that's what the policy will say, no more development based on MDD, and it'll be in place in September. And then those applications will come in front of council, and council will say, we have a policy that says we're not approving this based on water allocation, application denied. The zoning bylaw is different in the sense that the zoning bylaw looks at the zoning bylaw as a whole, not as specific zoning amendments. So we're looking, for example, at some council's concerns around preserving environmental areas, the 30 by 30 program. Well, those kind of changes can go into the zoning bylaw. It doesn't really matter to development. Short-term rental conversation is probably a little bit more interesting, but it's also the reason the short-term rental conversation zoning is so far back at the end, because we want to make sure that we understand how much water we have for what uses, if any. So limits to growth, it'll give us a policy, and then it's going to shade what that zoning bylaw review looks like, but it's not about specific. Those two aren't related in that sense.
And maybe I'll just add one more comment to what Mr. Rogers said. I really think that we're kind of talking about two different things. The zoning bylaws is influenced certainly by the limits to growth bylaw, but land use is not water use. So we can say to somebody, they come forward to us with a rezoning application, it's fits with their OCP, we like it, we can move them through the zoning, the rezoning process, we can get them their zone. They just might not be able to build on it for a few years, they might have to sit on their zone for several years. That's probably not what most public-oriented developers are interested in doing, but it is something that we can accommodate, and then that's why we have these development agreements that are pretty much being forward with every rezoning that the council's seen over the past year or so at this point. That kind of reiterates our authority. We already do have that authority to deny water connection. It kind of, develop suspenders thing where it just reiterates its own serves as a communication tool to the applicant, acknowledging that we like the land use and we actually like the development that we're proposing, but we just might not be able to service. So that's maybe another way to kind of think about it as well. Well, the limits to growth policy will certainly impact development in the community over the next several years. Our zoning bylaw can still be more of a visionary document that kind of outlines what we actually want to do. And we maybe be holding certain developments back, but it's not that we don't like the land use, it's that it's just going to take a while before we get the service.
Yeah, I think my point is if this policy comes into effect in September, that's okay. But if you're saying it's not going to be till November of next year, I don't think that is okay.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Well, the sooner for me, the better, which is why we're moving on a fairly accelerated process for this. And we're looking at 3 meetings.
Well, I've got another question for you. You talked about risk analysis. Risk analysis. I know the biggest risk in risk analysis is political risk. And in this town, it's a TFN. And you mentioned in the report a possible 140 unit development. I want to see how you can accommodate that in your risk analysis. If you're going to present some risk analysis. Sorry.
Thanks for taking the question. I mean, I'm not going to be looking, we're not going to be looking at things from whose application it is. We're going to be looking at it from how much water it's using and how much water we've decided to allocate. So if we go through that list and we see a bunch of single family homes there that we know use a lot of water and don't provide a lot of housing, are those appropriate? If a certain developer would propose, 35 fourplexes that use a quarter of the or a third of the water and house 4 times the amount of people, is that a better way to use that water allocation if we decide to use?
So what if that developers TFN?
I don't think it matters to the developers once we put the policy in place. I don't think it's, I'm not going to get too far into the political realm, but Tla'o-qui-aht First Nation and the District of Tofino work really well together. And simple fact of the matter is that the water that we're talking about comes from Tla'o-qui-aht First Nation land. That is a question for this table, not this table.
Okay, let's go on more questions for clarity. Council. I do have a question for clarity. Maybe we need some comments. Just a question for clarity. We've seen a list of developments in in the process of rezoning and so hypothetical water uses for those. What about undeveloped latent zoning for residential? Has that been sort of looked at in there if people have residential zoning, which would, presumably be in some of those, in that thing, where are they at? So in water use?
Yeah, thanks for the question. We've kind of been dealing with these things, case by case basis, really, as building permits come in. Currently, we've been trying not to hold up development. Again, as Mr. Rogers mentioned, it's a fairly uncomfortable place for staff to be in at this point in time because we don't have that policy kind of guiding us, and we have to be quite careful not to make arbitrary decisions. That's the way to put it. But we're basically relying on the professional advice of our consulting engineers as well as our engineering staff to kind of understand the impacts that various proposed developments will have currently on our water system, if we feel comfortable enough to accommodate it, and then making the decision based on that. If Mr. Rogers makes more comments.
Yeah, I think the only comment I would make is that we're not there yet. This meeting is about what we might be able to use in terms of water. Next meeting will be what that looks like in terms of potential risk, and I have a third meeting when all in front of council will hopefully address items like that, and so to Council Sawyer's questions about daycare, that has yet to come to council. We have yet to really dig into that, but again, everything needs to be addressed because we're going to have those questions. Where we are right now on a risk-based place is that we received that report in March. That's third month. We're going hopefully have to in front of council by September, so that's 7 months of us approving a building permit here, or a building permit there, a single family. Subdivisions have the development agreement that Mr. Thick is talking about. Large water that we just definitely can't accommodate our straight nose, and so we're making those decisions. There's going to be it's a train that's been moving very fast for a very long time. It takes a while to slow it down, so it's not going to be perfect. Where some things may go through, a house here, a house there, or something, that's okay. Like we're not in, we're in a place we need to be concerned, but it's not disaster. We're not saving lives here. It's get this development train slowed down, make some new decisions, move forward.
Maybe just a follow-up question. Just what I was looking for is the average single family build. Latent zoning's already there. They come for an application. They build a home. How many of those a year does Tofino see? Is it like 10 to 25 a year or less, or 12?
Let's say it's a good question, but my estimate, this is from talking to a building inspector, and unfortunately we don't have a very good typology tracker currently, but it's usually single family builds, I would say, kind of busier years, close to 20, and then this year it's actually been fairly quiet, so it might be even less than 10, but that's sort of on average what we see. What we're seeing a lot more now is kind of smaller accessory dwelling units, a lot of those forward, as well as a handful of larger builds as well. But it's currently not significant enough, significant. Mr. Rogers kind of alluded to that we're kind of totally running around and saying everything has to stop. We're trying to be as accommodating as possible for current developments, late development rights, those kinds of things. But again, it's going to come down to how things shake out through this policy and how we start allocating water and understanding what risk are.
Okay, I know you explained that this isn't about the hydraulic system, but in the report, it said one aspect of the distribution system that requires attention on present and future conditions is fire flow. There were some deficiencies, and I don't know if there was an explanation. I think it had to do with maybe additional hydrants within the system, but I was a little unclear on that. I wrote additional hydrants question mark. Is that the case? That would be the only deficiencies that we're looking at in that particular part of the distribution system?
Thanks for the question, Councillor Steer. Through the chair, from speaking to the engineer about that specifically, it's a couple of hydrants and a couple of undersized pipes in the downtown core. The plan assumes that our growth was to happen downtown, because the plan is based on our official community plan, which suggests that growth should happen in the downtown core. If we were to grow significantly in the south of Tofino, we'd have to invest significantly more, but even then we're not in terrible shape right now. So if you look at the chart from the water management plan, and there are a lot of tables, those issues are existing now. They wouldn't be caused because of new development. So basically things that we need to get ahead of and repair. So that would be the development cost charge. These projects are ongoing C&I levy projects for water. Replacing the water main on 4th, for example, will help somewhere down the line. And that's kind of the workings that we're working on is that.
Thank you.
Any further questions for clarity from council before we can move on to comments? Let's move on to comments. Comments from council. Councillor Steer.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate very much the report, and of course, and one of the things I identify that I'm waiting for is explanation of specific definitions of risk and risk scenarios that we'll see in August. I think that's going to help inform a lot of the conversation here today. So thank you for the background data. That's very helpful. I think most of the questions or comments I'll have is when we get an idea of what our risk tolerance and how we're going to define risk within our water system and our capacity within there. I did, there was some interesting, and I think Councillor McMaster pointed out in terms of the allocation methodologies, and I was very curious about some of the potential scenarios that you're looking at. You gave a couple of examples. I think it was Collingwood and Okotoks as a couple of areas of allocation methodology, and I had a few comments and questions around that, but I don't think this is the time or place for that. Have you guys, maybe it is a question now, rather than a comment, but and have you guys thought more about the allocation methodologies that we might employ, or is that, or we're going to be seeing that a little later on? Because I think that might help, inform how we're going to be going about in a more formalized way when it comes to how we're actually going to allocate those. I think I have a good idea of how we might go about it, but was there anything specific to start that?
No, it's okay. It's okay. I can jump around. Through the chair, thanks for touching. I think this is harder, Mr. Thick and I. From what I understand, we haven't thought about that much, other than we've done a little bit of basic research to understand how the communities might do it and so the options available to us. But for us, it was more important to figure out if we even should do that. Like if council comes back to us and says, we're not interested in allocating any more water, we're interested in running off maximum day demand, and we hear that at that next meeting in August, then we don't have to necessarily do that work. And so I'm hoping if we're meeting in September, it's likely more like, if we decide to move forward, here's the policy, and then it's going to be this kind of conversation. It might be better for a CAL meeting versus a council meeting, so we can have that backwards, and then maybe there's a subsequent meeting to finalize the. I don't think. Do you have anything? Yeah, sure. I'm kind of reiterating, but that's what I was saying there about we're kind of again waiting to sort of see a little bit more, discuss the risk kind of tolerance behind it. But I would say that there is sort of probably what will end up happening is that we'll develop a bit of a set of criteria through which to kind of evaluate various proposals, similar to what we do through zoning, and probably very similar thing. It may end up being kind of a point system, and if you reach a certain amount of points, we can kind of prioritize competing developments in that way. To be honest, that's probably not really like a comfortable position for anyone on staff or any developer, but that might just be under the circumstances, something that we have to do in order to try to create as fair and transparent of a system. And these would be things like OCP alignment, desired typologies as outlined in the housing needs assessment, potentially things like usage of rainwater harvesting mechanisms or offsetting mechanisms, maybe environmental protections, various other things. Again, not to try to make this onerous, but to try to again create some sort of process. Say, depending on who ends up approving these kinds of the water allocation thing, or how we're going to point about this, staff will come back to council and what we're presenting a new particular application for development. Today, this one scored 60 points. On average, we try to move forward with development applications that score 50 points or more. Again, I'm kind of just speaking a little bit, but it may end up with these.
And just a final comment was, the purpose of the LTG policy is to outline a path forward for development. Likely, I'm thinking this is I don't want to say an interim measures type agreement where we're looking at a specific time frame, because if we're, our water master plan, one of the things we're looking for is identifying potential source. And if that potential source, and we move on those, if we identify those potential sources and we move on those potential sources, this conversation, it will have some relevancy, but I think at the same time, the question then becomes, if we had all the water in the world, what would we do? So I suspect this type of policy is a time-framed one where we're looking at, your numbers between 5 and 10 years is what we're looking at until we identify potentially a source and allocate through there. Would that be an accurate assessment in terms of your thinking process on it?
I think it would be. Yeah, it's generally accurate. The policy itself will give us that decision, right? So it'll say whether it's time-based or cubic meters of more water that we've received or something like that. So it'll be a decision that council makes about how long it wants to do this. I should point out that we have a quasi-limited growth policy already in our official community plan, which in 2021 said we're going to build about 130 units. we didn't really track it, it's, you know, we were generally in that number. So this is not something that's unfamiliar for us, we're just formalizing this into a place where we can decide, we can track, and it's very clear. But we've been basically at a limit growth since 2021.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just happy to see this. I think it's been a long time coming. There was I mentioned open adults 13 years ago, so look forward to the next presentation.
Councillor Anderson?
Yeah, the comments I had, I mean, the presentation, clear paths about where we want to move. Because we know our residential priorities and where council's at, I don't see that changing too much. So if we grow, I think we can see what we would prioritize in terms of growth. Whatever we do or look at, I hope it doesn't jeopardize the building of a hospital. So I think we have to leave some sort of thought about that in the whole picture. The other comment I had was there were some I can't say specifically some ideas in the water master plan about how the system might be brought up, augmented, or otherwise sort of in the meantime before we find out what it is. So if we can maybe get a better picture of that as we're looking at what we're going to do, that I think that would be helpful in determining risk as well. And I honestly don't, without another water source, there's so much we can do now. The other comment I had was about another, and I think you touched on this when answering Councillor Steer's question. If a development can use gray water systems or water catchment or find their own source by whatever means that might be, I think then whether it's a point system or there might be a way for developments that can prove out whatever less demanding on the system that might be able to move forward or be prioritized as well. Yeah, that's all I have.
Robert?
Maybe if I could just comment on Councillor Anderson's last comment. I think that's a great idea. We're currently working with at least 2 developers on alternate water. You know, get them understanding that we don't have water for them, and they're actively pursuing what that looks like for their types of developments. And so, and as I've spoken with those developers, District of Tofino is all ears about that. We're not here to, you know, stop development. We have a water situation, and it's going to take everybody to help figure that out. But those are active conversations, just so council's aware.
Okay. No further comments from council. Just a question for staff. Just generally, were you looking for some kind of direction or feedback from council last time, or you just you specifically want to hear that you haven't heard?
There was no particular action that we were requesting from council at this point in time. It was more to keep council updated on our general file process and get any feedback from council to make sure that we were generally on you know, kind of thinking the same way and moving in the same direction. If there's any major issues that council has, so that we can get them clarified and not come forward with a policy that is completely out of that or the council hasn't anticipated in some way. So there's no unless there's some very specific comments or very specific issues with staff so far, I don't action that's.
Okay. I have two requests. Actually, one, maybe I'll just stick it at one, but if we're gonna come back and discuss, you know, possible zoning applications, rezoning applications, I would like to see personally the latent zoning for residential that we already have in as well, because you know, just quickly looking at say 10 to 20 single family homes being built that aren't in the rezoning queue, that aren't, you know, in that accounting, you know, that over 5 years, that's 25 to 50 cubic meters of water, and which becomes significant. So I would like to, that would be my one preference, is to see that calculation as well, so that we have a fuller picture of what we're deciding. And I'll leave the next question for that. Great, go ahead, you can be the right one. Yeah.
I'll move that the report entitled Limits to Growth Policy Water Allocation Priorities dated July 23rd, 2024 be received for information and discussion.
Second by Councillor Thomas. Any further comments? All in favor? None opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Yeah, we're gonna take a little, we're gonna take a 5-minute break. Okay, Rogers, zoning bylaw overview.
Good evening, once again, Mayor Council. The good news is that this slideshow is only 14 slides compared to 19 pages of major read in the report. It's my intent to go through this at a very high level and look for any questions that come out of the report. There's a lot in that report. I'm going to move through and happy to obligate questions at any time. Again, why are we doing this? Well, we like to organize land use in our communities. We do that through starting with the Constitution and then moving out to provincial legislation, municipal legislation, and then we organize our land use based on the principles that we've chosen as a society. Any zoning amendments, I think we're all aware, it's always good to say, to be aligned with the official community plan. The community plan is our guiding land use document in BC and definitely at Tofino. Our current zoning bylaw has had 137 amendments over the last 27 years, give or take. It's not unusual to amend a zoning bylaw every time we amend a property zoning, that's an amendment. We undertook significant updates in 2012, 2015, and most recently in 2019. And then here we are again today looking at not an update, but a rewrite of that zoning bylaw. These objectives are I believe, where we're going as an organization, as a community. We're looking to prioritize the development of housing. I think that's almost in every meeting we talk about housing and how we need more. Obviously, we have water issues, as we just discussed. We're going to want to most likely increase our residential density, support OCP policies, and analytics concerns. We're looking to strengthen environmental protection in all zones, minimize further growth in the peninsula ocean interface and rural land use designations. This comes out of our community plan. Review further growth in our commercial accommodation zones, review short-term rental permissions, and incorporate provincial regulations. That's generally our broad objectives in this process. The principles of the OCP, which line up well with our objectives: reconciliation, housing, conservation of natural environment, authenticity, which is basically what the design or the look or the feel of our community is, authentic to who we are as community well-being, economy, and resilience. Resilience has to do with how we react and how we react to impacts from things like climate change or natural disasters like tsunamis. So from those objectives, through the lens of the principles of the OCP, we've come out with 5 focus areas, which will be the focus of subsequent reports to council. We're going to look at council's strategic plan. We're going to review the zoning bylaw to make sure any housekeeping items need to be updated. We're going to look at provincial legislation to ensure that we're aligned with current legislation. Review our official community plan to make sure there's any changes that we can make, any direction the OCP can be then translated into a zoning bylaw. And then finally, we're gonna look at short-term rental use. This is probably the most important slide of today, and in this report. Basically, it's council's plan for the next year and a bit, identifying what report is coming, what it's about, and when it's coming. You'll be able to refer back to this when I'm late getting your report. We are today at the top one, report to Cal zoning bylaw update process. We're not actually in Cal, but that was the intent originally. The limits to growth policy is coming forward in September for our last discussion. And then we're going to get into the actual 5 focus areas. And so we'll begin with, again, strategic priorities, housekeeping, bridge legislation, OCP, and short-term rentals. So we're going to go through each of those in a fair amount of detail. Hopefully, not all 19 pages. Some of them may be longer. And once we've got some understanding of what council is interested in, once we provided what some of the options or concerns or issues are, we'll come back to council in the spring of next year in a very large report that has all the proposed amendments in one place. It'll likely have a concurrence table saying what the current bylaw has and what we're proposing to change. And once we have that, we'll be ready to go and speak with the community about the changes that we're proposing to make based on all of those. Following that, we'll look at undertaking a first reading and then back to community for the feedback. Second reading and repeat second reading as many times as necessary. And then into our hearings, third and final. Once we get past basically RTC 6, the first reading, it's the only thing slowing us down is how many times we get second reading. This process is exactly what we used for the last zoning review in 2019, I think, and also very similar to our official community plan in 2021 process. In 2019, I think we started at that update in 2016, but we hit second reading, I think 3 times over the course of 2 years. So we'd come forward, we'd find a tweak, we'd have to go back and make those changes, and we want to make sure we involved. So hopefully we get it right, which is why we're going to have that report to council to try to get rid of anything that's not and that shouldn't be in there early. First reading to be really sure about what we're doing, and then moving to the end there. You'll see engagement happens around them. It's really hard for the community or other stakeholders to comment on proposed government legislation without actually seeing that legislation. So I don't want to have really broad talks about ideas. I'd like to have people be really concerned about a specific item or a specific line in the proposed bylaw.
Oh, yeah. Okay, try again.
Again, back to our earlier conversation, decisions on limits of growth will drive a lot of the zoning process in the latter half of that process. So the short-term rentals, some of the OCP language itself. So in the end, we're going to be working within this limits to growth box in terms of growth, anyways, in the OCP. I'm going to go through briefly each of the 5 focus areas. So we have a strategic plan that wants us to ensure we have a safe, secure, and sufficient supply of water, directly related to limits to growth. We want to ensure the ability and affordability of safe and secure housing and meet the diverse needs of our residents, again related to the OCP and limits to growth. And to ensure that our valued green spaces and other natural assets are preserved and enhanced for future generations. This one will likely be the bulk of the first report the council sees will be around goal 3, what we can do in terms of 30 for 30, what that looks like, what some ideas are. So that'll be the first report after limits to growth that you see. Some of these other 2 may end up in another section because I don't want to. There's going to be overlap between the 5 focus areas, and so just trying to figure out which belongs where is going to be part of this process. So at this point, it's likely that first report will primarily be goal 3. Housekeeping, I just put together a quick list working with Mr. Thick and Mr. Ladder about some of the things that we might want to address. Coastal floodplain considerations, bringing those out of the coastal flood bylaw and into actual zones might be an idea. review our parking table and our parking permissions. It's not in the greatest shape right now, so want to repeat out that. Reviewing short-term permissions, just make sure we have those right, not the bigger picture of short-term rentals, but the smaller. There's some issues in the language that we want to tweak. Review setbacks, landscaping and the definition section. And then an idea of seeing if it's possible to amalgamate some of our zones to make fewer zones. So maybe we don't need, this is something that province is doing, and we'll probably look at that section later anyways, but province is looking to allow, fourplexes, and, can we make a new downtown zone that allows you to do any of those items? Likely that will come out of the provincial legislation review. We're gonna get into the Short-Term Rentals Accommodation Act, even though we spent a lot of time there this year, but we're gonna stay in it. And the Housing Statutes, Residential Developments, Amendments Act doesn't necessarily apply in full to us, but it's probably a really good guide for looking at what future zones might want to be. The province provided a lot of resources and information for communities that are subject to that to help out with things like fourplexes. This again is happening probably 6 months out, and so we should also have some more information about how this is unfolding in the communities and provide us a little bit more insight to what we want to do. District community plan, so this basically involves going through the OTP, looking at all the various policies and seeing if any of them are related to land use in the zoning bylaw. So we'll also be looking at water and housing policies. Looking at specific land use direction based on our water constraints. So does the missing notes help us out with that? Probably. Looking at core policies, which kind of broader policies in the environment. And then there's specific land use policies in section 5 for all the different areas in Tofino, the village, future homes, industrial, and so on and so forth. So we'll look at those and see if there's any specific policies in those separate sections that can be applied to the new zones or the amended zones that we're going to be considering. Commercial accommodation, we're going to also take a really good look at this. This will be the last one before we put it all together in the big report. Looking at short-term rentals, bed and breakfast use, resorts, hotels, motels, hostels and campground zones. And there'll be a last report, again, prior to drafting this bigger report. A lot of this will be likely impacted by the limited growth conversation about what we've decided to do in terms of water. So engagement, so far planning for about 11 reports and presentations. This is number 1. 2 engagement processes, a public hearing, a number of stakeholder meetings, and obviously Tla-o-qui-aht. We'll also be engaging with both the First Nation. And if we get to a point where we feel that we need more engagement, we can just add it in at a certain point. So that's always possible as well. My hope is that we can hold up post engagement until we're halfway through the process and we have something to share. And that is a much shorter presentation than it was a report.
All right, thank you. Let's open it up to council for questions for clarity, and perhaps maybe at the same time we could just do comments, since it's questions and comments. But just keep it short so everybody has a turn. How's that sound? Go ahead.
I'll go with the question then, and actually, it's on the schedule part of it, the engagement in May in 2025. I'm just curious, was there? I mean, you've had successful formats in the past. Have you thought about what format you might take? And this is a big one. What format you might be looking at for that proposed engagement?
I haven't gotten into the details of what I'm thinking is it's probably a town hall meeting or something like that, or a couple of presentations of what we're proposing to do, then opportunities for the community to talk about it. That would then be allowed, you know, talk to and presented, tied in with a survey or something to talk to. I think that's what I would do. I think this is one that's so big that you want people in the same room, tell them where you got it right, where you got it wrong. And so those engagement processes are likely, there's probably 1 or 2 or 3 per engagement process for meetings.
Okay. And maybe it's my comments will be quicker. I really want to commend you on the framework that you put forward. Very much supportive of the board of evaluation. And those focused areas, I think is well thought out, and I think the order is appropriate. And the focus on each of those sections, I know there will be a little tweaking as you pointed out within there, what might go in where, but the overall structure, I think is really well thought out. Thank you in the report for outlining some of the considerations in each of those sections. I will admit, it's certainly on ones like the 30 by 30 where I started going down a rabbit hole and where you had, outlined, we need to define a few things within there, such as, protection, green space. So certainly there's a lot of questions that still need to be answered and those, and I appreciate you bringing those up within the report once again. I'm going to leave it there. Just once again, very thoughtful. Thank you. And I look forward to the work ahead here in the next year and a half.
Thank you, Councilor. I had to be edited back from more than that. I went down that full through the beats on rabbit hole.
Great, thanks.
Okay, any comments from council?
I just one comment, and maybe this will take care of itself somehow, but I think there may be some things that we're not thinking of in terms of emerging work from home kind of things, and emerging economies around tech and changing technology that may impact some of the residential zones. And and we do have the home-based occupations, but they may evolve to something over the next 20 to 30 years too. So I don't know what kind of thinking might go into that as we go through this, but I'm trying to think of things that we don't know about, things that we might get blindsided by 5 years after we adopt it. So and things that we can know about that and try and incorporate it.
I appreciate the comment. I think that type of question will probably live under the housekeeping section and probably sit with the planners to see what they're hearing about potential home occupations. In my past experience, in my the way that I worked through a home occupation section of that bylaw is needing to be as broad as I could be versus specific. And that's what we have again. But we prefer. So that's a great quality.
Yeah, we didn't anticipate Airbnb when we took on our short-term rental regulations and stuff like that.
Right, it's well thought out, it's ambitious. I think council and town has got some tough decisions to make in the year ahead.
Further comments from council? Questions? Okay. Moving on.
You move the recommendation?
Sure.
I move that the report titled zoning overview dated July 23rd, 2024 be considered in this section.
Second by Mr. Steer, any further comments? All in favor? None opposed, motion carried. All right, then we're moving on to 10.3 zoning amendment bylaw. 5-6.
Back in, hopefully this one is a little bit more important. So this is a zoning amendment bylaw that we've been considering for a couple of years now. It's for the property 565 Campbell Street, and we'll be thinking about third reading this evening. So the zoning application has been in process for some time now. It was originally received on March 18th, 2022. Permission received, followed shortly after in April of 2022. Everything happened in June of 2022, and there's a bit of a gap between first and second readings for a variety of reasons. But we got a second reading November 28th, 2023. Since that time, we've really been kind of trying to work through housing agreements and various other aspects, primarily of the affordable housing part of the overall development. It's staff's understanding that council is generally in favor of development, and there's just a few kind of particular details that needed to be worked out around affordable housing as well. So we'll talk about that when we get into the presentation. Just a reminder, this is the location of the property. It actually stands, it's addressed off of Campbell Street, but it's primarily in front of actually on Gibson Street. So it's basically across Gibson Street from what is now Gibson Heights development, but does also have frontages both on Cypress Crest and as well as on Campbell Street. Just to point out again, the area that's considered for development currently is sort of the western wing of the property. It's outlined there in the dashed red. So not the entire property we're looking at development right now, but just that section. As the proposal again, we have a dashed red line that kind of outlines that western wing of the property. We are looking at basically a series of townhouses, 3 stories in height, with studio apartments on the bottom and 2-story apartments on the top 2. I'm not sure what happened to the formatting on the slide, so I apologize for that. Sometimes that was completely lost in translation of the computers. I wanted to talk a little bit about the affordable housing components of this development. We've been kind of working with lawyers and with the developer for the past several months to try to finalize the housing agreement that we're hoping to get the developer to enter into. It's become quite challenging for several reasons. There's a bit of uncertainty around financing for the project and how it might actually move forward. There's a bit of uncertainty around specific units that might be designated. It's a little bit challenging from the lawyer's perspective to be very, very precise, but also allow the developer a little bit of movement that they might need to secure the appropriate financing as well as move through the actual construction. It is actually quite difficult to register the covenant in an appropriate manner before the property still needs to be subdivided building process. So the developers kind of noted that this is a little bit challenging for them at this point in time. So as a result of that, we're kind of looking for a bit of an alternative path forward. So our proposal currently is as part of the development covenant that we're requiring the developer to enter into prior to adoption. One of the requirements within that covenant is to sell 2 units to THC at an agreed upon rate. The THC, once they own it within one of their kind of standard housing agreements that are used for the THC projects onto those specifically, and then those units with all policies. So rather than the developer registering the housing agreement, it would be the Tofino Housing Corporation, just allow a bit of a smooth process. So the development covenant in whole actually addresses a few other things. This is kind of our last outstanding piece of the puzzle for the particular zoning. So the development covenant that would be executed prior to adoption will include considerations for form and character. So there is no form and character development permit that covers that part of the property. So what we're looking to ensure is that what has been presented to council through the rezoning process will be almost identical to what is built. We'll allow for some wiggle room because that tends to be necessary during the construction process. But in general, we're not looking to surprise council with some type of building that is maybe conforms to zoning, but is not in appearance what was presented during the zoning process. We'll also be requiring sprinklers in the buildings. To be clear, it's likely, maybe kind of depending on a few things, but it's likely that the BC Building Code will already require sprinklers. We just want to make sure that that's covered. So we again kind of put that in the within the covenants. Right to refuse a building permit based on water capacity. We talked about this a little bit already in this meeting, so I think council understands the necessity for that. We'll also be looking to have a connector path between Gibson and Cypher. There's kind of a cul-de-sac at the top of Cypher that would be connected through to Gibson Field's property, a pedestrian path that would likely be secured through the subdivision process, but we would include it in this covenant to ensure that it is acquired during that process. There would be a requirement as well to sell 2 units to THC that I noted, and then we would also have a requirement for privacy screening around the parking area. That was something that came up during consultation with the neighboring communities. That was a concern of having the parking area towards the back, and any neighboring properties are maybe likely to get some headlights rated to their backyard. So we would be looking to secure some privacy screening. So the next steps for the project would be potentially coming back for adoption, maybe in the next council meeting or 2. Then we would be also looking to adopt our limits growth policy and ensuring that this proposed development is consistent with whatever we decide to move forward with in that area. If it is deemed consistent, we would then come forward with the subdivision, and then building permit following that. It may be that we allow the subdivision to take place even if it's not limits growth, but it's unlikely that the developer would want to go down that route. Should we kind of advise them in advance that they may not be consistent with our limits growth policy, so we can move forward with the building permit. And I believe that's the end of my presentation. So fairly short and sweet, but this is one that we've talked about a few times already. Are there any questions or comments or concerns with the change in approach to affordable housing units?
All right, questions for clarity from Mr. Thick? So, sir.
I've got a question regarding the change to selling the 3 units to the THC. In the report, it also mentions that if that is not, if that doesn't occur and the project's completed, the developer would transfer to the district an appropriate sum of cash corresponding to the price reduction the THC would have obtained for the use, or anyhow, how would that work then? What are we, like, I'm just wondering why that's an option we would entertain.
Thank you for the question, Councilor. Through the chair, it's an option that's worth entertaining, at least in staff's opinion. Council may not agree, but it's an option that's worth entertaining because what we've come to realize as staff is that it can be quite a challenging development environment currently within at large, but particularly in Tofino, it's quite expensive to buy land, it's quite expensive to build, all these kinds of things. So in order for us to gain the general benefit of having this development, it's aligned with the OCP, it provides housing, even if it is market housing. I know we're trying to prioritize affordable housing. It does give the developer an opportunity to continue to build the project, even if they're not able to provide the affordable housing there. And then it also provides the district the ability to still obtain some benefit that we can then give towards affordable housing initiatives. And so either we get 2 units or we get the cash value of those units. That cash towards our. So I understand that that's the cash value is likely not as enticing to council, but it is something that we work with the developer to provide them an option to avoid having to scrap the whole project.
If I may follow up with a comment on that, and thank you to the chair for that clarity. That is however how I understood it. And for myself, as we've been discussing this project, having a developer other than THC creating affordable housing or within another project is to me the big green light with this type of development. So I don't necessarily see the benefit that a smaller amount of cash could do for the THC that would be equivalent to receiving those 2 units of housing. That someone else is running, organizing, so I don't really personally feel comfortable with the way this has changed. It's gone from a very self-supported model of non-market housing to something that would be putting quite a bit of onus on the district.
But I don't think there's necessarily a question for me to answer, but I would note that the original memorandum of understanding that was presented to council, I believe that I'm not sure if it was first or second reading of this that was initially prepared between the Tofino Housing Corporation and the developer in this case, did consider the opportunity for varying market conditions when it comes to development, and basically offered the developer even at that time the opportunity for cash payments in lieu of providing affordable housing units. So this is it's all.
No, and thank you, I do understand that as well.
The only other development I can think of that had an affordable housing component when Q&amp was built. Were they given an option to pay cash instead of providing that, or did they have to provide that as part of their agreement? And I only ask because there's examples like I think about in Quebec, where there was something that was put in where it was things need to have an affordable housing component or cash paid, and every single development paid cash. So I just want to know if there's been an example, especially locally. It would be encouraging if I've heard that there was an example where they were given that option, but they chose to still provide the affordable housing. Otherwise, I'm not comfortable with giving them that option to just kind of cash out.
Yeah, thank you for your question. The one other example that comes to mind is with the Gateway development. I believe one of those units was also designated as an affordable unit and given to the District of Tofino. I be honest, I wasn't actually on staff at the time that those were developed. I think maybe Mr. Rod might have more information about those, so maybe I'll let him give us any comments.
You Mr. Fix, through the chair. Councilor Thomas. Just thinking about this, so the Sea Otter Place development was just a unit, and at the time, we didn't have, it was not running at that point, and we were trying to get housing where we could without any policy, without any support, and so we based the covenant, we went through this model of, we can't manage it either, so let's get a unit, let's put a covenant on it, let's release it into the wild and into the future, it will be affordable, so that was the approach, that we never talked about cash. Before my time, I think the district did have those conversations and we did get cash for certain developments that we then used to fund the old version of the Tofino Housing Corporation. I'm thinking of Cox Bay Beach Resort, 1431 is where I think it was. There may have been one other one, but in my time here, it's generally been just the units. And at the time, it was because we didn't have the resources to manage this ourselves.
Other comments from council? Questions and comments? Council want to weigh in on thoughts on the council steer?
Sure, I am supportive of the project. It has been on the table for a while now. It fits very nicely with the OCP and the work that we're looking at doing in terms of in lieu of our water allocation conversations, but in terms of the land use, I think this is a very appropriate use of the land in this particular location. It meets all of the check boxes for me personally that we go through, and certainly in our guiding documents, our D2A, our OCP, etc., our housing needs assessment. It aligns very, very nicely with all of those. There are some conversations that we'll need to have in terms of the overall attainable portion of that, but we're also looking at a supply issue in our community, and so I would be remiss to have, and I know developers put pressures in different ways, but I would be remiss to have a project not move forward based on some of those considerations. So I'm very supportive of it, and I think the navigating the complexity of that housing agreement is still to come, but it's not enough for me not to support third reading of this project.
All right.
No, I'm supportive of it, and it's housing, I'm not particularly happy about the cash arrangement. I mean, I think back when we initially started, we were looking at getting 4 units. The very first, and that was very attractive. And then we got beat down to 2 units, and now there's a possibility of cash. So I'm going to support this because we need housing anyway, but I much prefer getting 2 units than just cash.
Can I ask you a question? Is it possible to amend this before the reading to remove the cash in lieu?
That would be very difficult, I'm sure, but
if council has an issue with this and it's enough for council to not consider the reading, I would advise maybe deferring rather than trying to amend it on the fly. These are to change something like this. I think it would be only fair to also discuss this with the developer prior to council kind of work with the change.
All right, thank you.
maybe just a question for clarity. What was the THC's role in navigating and coming to that agreement of cash in lieu?
That was, thanks for the question. I'll try to clarify as best I can. That was, the initial MOU was prepared, for units was prepared, with, the help of the former executive director of the Tofino Housing Corporation, Ian Scott. So he worked quite closely with the developer to create an MOU that basically outlined various development scenarios, and outlined how the THC would be likely wanting to buy 4 units. But if that wasn't possible based on certain market conditions, they would still buy 3 units. There'd be cash flow or 2 units with a larger sum of money, or 1 unit with an even larger sum of money. And there's kind of various scenarios that would play out throughout the MOU. And so that was the THC kind of negotiated that, and really, I would say to Mr. Scott's credit, he sort of took that on his own and created this very, kind of quite comprehensive MOU that he worked with the applicant to kind of prepare and finalize, and then they brought it forward together. The THC and the applicant brought it forward to the districts. And that was what was presented, I believe, around first reading. I would note, though, however, since the departure of Mr. Scott from the THC, we had a bit of a change where the developer wanted to simplify the agreement and said, look, why don't I just give you either 2 units for cash? And that was kind of how we ended up where we've been at today. So that original MOU did contemplate cash payments, but was much more detailed than what we have currently.
Okay. Councillor?
If I may follow up with a comment, I certainly hear Councillor Steer's point about the need for housing and not wanting to delay. However, I agree with Councillor Thomas that I would rather see housing that is completed by another developer that we then obtain than cash that we may or may not be able to complete housing with on our own. So the cash in lieu would be enough for me to not support third reading. Is it possible to defer?
It's always possible that whether or not council goes for it. We have a question for clarity. What would the cash in lieu amounts be? Was that for everybody?
Thank you for the question. I don't have a precise answer. Typically, what we would do to kind of calculate the cost of the THC, we would take the average pre-sale values of all the other units. So typically what a developer would do prior to even going to a bank to look for funding is they'll actually pre-sell a lot of the units. They'll then go to the bank and say, look, I've pre-sold 70% of my units. That reduces the bank's risk considerably, or whoever the lender is, whether it's a private lender, whoever it might be, because they've already basically said, okay, well, look, the worst case, I can sell 3/4 of these units and I can pay you back and I won't make any profit, whatever it is. So the bank's risk threshold is considerably lowered. And so out of all those pre-sale values, we would average them out and reduce 35% from that. So it's kind of estimated that the average pre-sale will be probably, for depending on the unit, somewhere between 400,000, 400 to 500,000, maybe for one of the studio units, and then maybe between 600,000 to 700,000 for maybe one of the 2-bedroom units, in that general range. So the savings would be take $200,000. Again, I'm just right now. I don't actually know. I'm just trying to sort of ballpark answer. Maybe $180,000 to $200,000 for the larger units, and maybe so it's not insignificant, but I would also appreciate what Councillor Thomas and Councillor Sawyer are saying, that it does take significant funds, as we've seen in THC's previous efforts to get any sort of housing.
Just maybe another question for clarity. What is the purchase agreement for the units? Is it market rate for THC, or what are those, or is it cost?
Thanks for the question. So the purchase agreement would be for the 35% below the average of pre-sale values.
Oh, that's
what the THC would purchase it at. And then the THC would then turn around and sell it again at that rate with the housing agreement on, according to their policies.
All right. Thank you. Well,
I guess
Councillor Thomas?
I just have a question about, I guess, the procedure here, because can we do the third reading and then that gets changed before we hold off adoption until we're satisfied, or should we defer third reading until we're satisfied with the options?
Thanks for the question. Through the chair, my advice would be if council is unsatisfied with moving forward as things are, my advice would be to defer. Colloquially, third reading tends to be construed as approval by council, and then when we come back for adoption of bylaws, there's usually not a report, there's usually not a big to do, it's just, kind of the final legal things go wrapped up and the bylaws ready for adoption. So if council is uncertain about moving forward at this point, my advice would be to defer. I believe one of the recommendations, there's sort of a draft recommendation that includes some language to essentially defer third reading until council's concerns with the bylaw have been addressed.
All right, well, I'm a little torn, to be honest. I do think we need this. I like this project a lot. I think we've been supportive of this project. We have seen a decrease, certainly since the beginning of the affordable units. And it does appear, this one is based on the goodwill of the developer to come, to sell to THC. Otherwise, you could sell for a little more. But I think I'm willing to go ahead and take a chance personally, but I'm also I will look to council. If council wants to defer this, as the majority of council wants to defer this, to see if the developer will take that connection lieu clause out, then that's council's priority, so prerogative. So maybe what I'll do is, because we've got two fairly strong voices here, let's go down and have a look.
I'm in support of moving ahead, and largely for the same reasons as Councillor Steer. I mean, if we could hold off for that change that some council is seeking, but overall the project is providing a number of units outside of the negotiated units that are needed. So on balance, I think we should go ahead.
Okay. Councillor Masters already at his position.
Yeah, I tend to agree on that. This was need the housing going forward with anything else. I think that'd be more hard nosed. That's to say, we want bricks and mortar. Oh, gosh.
That's a good point. Councillor Sloman?
I really like this proposal and I'm willing to move forward with it. I think this is exactly the type of housing our community needs.
Okay. All right, well, it sounds like majority of council's in favor of moving forward, albeit I think we should make a note to the applicant that we definitely want those affordable units. That would be our preference. And moving forward, I think we need to, I think Councillor Master has a good point, to remove the ambiguity and be a little more hard-nosed about getting units.
Unless it was a significant amount of money.
Yeah, I mean, the THC is doing development on its own, and so is going to need some capital for sure for THC units. I know that, so I know that the cash in hand is also, something that THC is going to look at. Okay, then. Well, I think we're going to read the question, Councillor Steer or Councillor Basher. Go ahead.
I'll read that the District of Tofino zoning amendment bylaw number 1320/22 be read a third time.
Second. Second by Councillor Steer. Any further comments? Go ahead.
I can only echo that I really hope we see these units and not a token cash in lieu.
Okay. Voted. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. All right, moving along. Oh, sorry, there is a second part. Go ahead.
The adoption of District of Tofino zoning amendment bylaw number 1320/2022 be withheld until an appropriate development covenant addressing affordable units, form and character and other concerns have been prepared and executed to the satisfaction of the manager of planning services.
Second. Second by Councillor Anderson. Any further comment? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think just when this comes back for adoption, I will still be looking to see that the cash is addressed. I voted in favor of reading it a third time, but I will hold off on adoption if personally.
Super, thanks. Thanks for sharing it, Hansel. Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Not opposed, motion is carried, thank you. We are. I'm at the end of my page. Oh, here we go. Let's see, no, it's a little after that. Here, just a second. Let me make sure I'm in the right spot. Going to 10.4. Okay. We are moving on to 10.4. We have application for patron participation endorsement. The Bear.
All right, hello, this is Ecstatic, or through the chair, this is Ecstatic Bylaw Services Supervisor and Planner 1. This report is regarding patron participation endorsement application for the Bear, which is part of the MAC. And let's just make sure I can actually get this. There we go. So McQuina Enterprises Incorporated, known as the MAC, located 120 First Street, is seeking to obtain a patron participation endorsement for the Bear Restaurant's food primary license. Food primary licenses are for establishments where the primary focus is the services of food, such as restaurants, bistros, and cafes. Food primary licenses cannot provide patron participation, which I'll define in the next slide, without an endorsement on their license for a special events permit. An establishment is limited to a maximum of 6 per year. So patron participation entertainment is any form of live entertainment that entails the involvement of patrons or results in patrons leaving their seats, such as karaoke, dancing, or amateur nights in which patrons are invited to sing, dance, or perform. Patron participation entertainment is permitted in liquor primary license establishments without requiring an endorsement. Patron non-participation entertainment is any form of live entertainment that does not entail the active involvement of patrons or result in patrons leaving their seats. And this includes live music or DJs and stage performances. Patron non-participation entertainment is permitted in food primary license establishments without requiring an endorsement. For some background, the MAC holds a 2024 business license for a hotel with adjunct services, being the cafe, restaurant, and bar, and is licensed for 242 seats altogether. The Bear, previously doing business as the McQuina Hotel Restaurant, has held an active food primary license with the LCRB since July 31st, 2002. The food primary license has the following occupancy limits, being the maximum number of people allowed in each space, as 168 persons in the patio area, 182 persons in the cafe lounge area, and 113 in the restaurant area. The license allows liquor service so long as the kitchen is open for food service from 11 a.m. to midnight. Presently, the Mac Cafe operates from 7:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. and the Bear Restaurant operates from 3 p.m. to 10 p.m. 7 days a week. So this is just a bit of background, which April shared during her presentation regarding the Legion's application for their liquor primary license, just about which applications and local government will be invited to provide comment on. And under food primary, where there's an application for a patron participation entertainment endorsement, a local government will be invited to provide comment. And we have, again, the same slide from April's presentation about the licensing process. And I'll just skip ahead to show that we are in the yellow stage here, where we're going to make the decision whether or not we've reviewed the application, and we contact LCLB or the applicant on any issues. And at this point, we decide whether or not we are going to choose to seek public comment so that we may make our own comment on the application. So where the local government opts to collect the views of residents and provide comment to the LCRB, staff will prepare notice to properties within a 60-meter radius of the applicant's location and collect the views of affected residents. A $600 public notification fee is collected from the applicant as per District of Tofino Liquor Control and Licensing Application Procedure Bylaw number 947. Staff will prepare a report to council summarizing the responses collected, and council must provide comment to LCRB based on those responses. And there are some requirements of what can and can't be commented on. Where the local government opts out, the LCRB will gather the views of residents and may request additional information from staff at the local government or First Nation to determine if it would be in the public interest to approve the application. We have two possible recommendations here. One is that staff proceed to gather the views of residents potentially impacted by McQuina Enterprise Incorporated's application to the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch for a patron participation endorsement for the Bear Restaurant's food primary license for the purpose of providing the LCRB with a resolution from council providing comments and recommendations, or alternatively, that the LCRB be advised that the District of Tofino Council does not wish to provide comments and recommendations to the branch respecting the application submitted by McQuina Enterprise Inc. to the LCRB for a patron participation endorsement, as set out in the LCRB application signed June 2024. And that is the end of my short and sweet presentation, and I am open to any questions or comments.
Super, thank you, Ms. Tackley. Let's open it up to council for questions for clarity. Oh, go ahead.
I just want to make one comment. I want to do this at the beginning, but Q&amp is our new. We've had a lot of presentation, but that was her first presentation to council and her current role. She previously did work for the District of Tofino from about 2018 to I believe 2020. Left to go work in the North for a few years, gained a bunch of experience, and recently has come back to join us. We're very lucky to have her, very happy to have her. Hopefully she gets someplace to live here.
I should have said that. Well, we're very happy you're here.
Thank you.
Well, that's now we get some questions from council. Go ahead, Councillor Sawyer.
I just had a question for clarity. Do we have information as well on what the capacity for the Mac bar would be, which would be operating at the same time as these potential 3 areas?
Through the chair, just give me one moment to double check that. I don't have that here, but they are it's the same business license for us. However, they are 2 separate LCRB licenses, with the Mac downstairs being liquor primary and the restaurant being the Bear upstairs being the food primary license.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Question for clarity from council. Okay, let's move on to comments. Is there something, Councillor Steer?
Yeah, this might come as a surprise. I'm quite supportive of this. It's one of those bureaucratic pieces of information. Is a patron participation endorsement instead of them having to go out time and time again for a special events permit. This is pretty straightforward. They threw out their application process here. I see that it's between 5 and 9 p.m. I'm hoping that karaoke will be in there and that Coral Palm will be up here to enjoy her music. So I would be very supportive of this without us having to provide comment.
Council?
I agree with Councillor Steer, sorry. I'm in support of proceeding without input from the district.
Excellent, thank you. Maybe I'll just ask council, is anybody opposed or does anybody want staff to go out and get the views of public? Okay, I see no other comments or questions. Somebody like to read them out?
Sure, I can do that. That the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch be advised that the District of Tofino Council does not wish to provide comments and recommendations to the branch respecting the application submitted by McQuinn Enterprises, Inc. to the Liquor and Cannabis Regulations Branch for a patron participation endorsement for the Bear Restaurant's food primary license as set out in the LCRB application signed June 2024.
Second by Councillor Thomas. Any further comments? All in favor? None opposed, motion carried. Thank you, Ms. Tack.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna run right down to item 14. Ms. Pelcha, do you have anybody signed up for?
Questions. Thank you, Mayor Law. I will now make a call to the public for questions. If there is anyone attending online via Zoom that would like to ask questions, you can do so now using the Q&A function. You will need to state your name, your address, and the agenda item you're speaking to. I will now do a calling once, calling twice, calling 3 times. There are no questions at this time, Mayor Law.
All right, super. Would a councillor like to move us into the closed section with the recommendation? Next.
I move that the meeting be closed to the public pursuant to sections 91A, C, G, and 92B of the Community Charter to discuss matters relating to 91A, personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employee, or agent of the municipality or another position appointed by the municipality. C, labor relations or other employee relations. G, litigation or potential litigation affecting the municipality. 2D, the consideration of information received and held in confidence relating to negotiations between the municipality, provincial government, or the federal government, or both, the provincial government, or the federal government, or both, and the third party.
Councillor Anderson, all in favor? Okay, none opposed, motion carried. We're moving into closed.